fucking insulting. So I had a nice lady to come on the page not too long ago, and she was saying that, that she likes them both, and she doesn't want to choose. And I'm like, girl, that's fine. Like, I'm not here to tell you who you like, who you dislike. But I think that people do deserve the right to know about the situation, about the stuff that Chinese people have. I'm glad I know. And I don't think people should be over it. I think it should be out there and open, and then just let people know the truth. I'm about letting it all get out. Let people know the truth, and then they can make their decision from there. I'm glad that I know. I made my decision about how I feel. There are people that know what she did, and they still support her, and that's fine too. Although I will say I think that they probably didn't do as much digging as the people that are adamantly against her did, because I don't really see, if you know that somebody has lied to that degree and manipulate to that degree, how you can ever trust them again. But I digress, and I know there are people that are just, they don't like confrontation, they don't want things to get uncomfortable. But that's life, and I just feel like no real change is ever going to come into society if we're still playing these bullshit ass games about, just picking people.
To change with the guys and make it natural, we would say that's sexual harassment.
Winger believes the case will eventually end up at the U.S. Supreme Court. I'm Chris Woodward.
And sales of new U.S. homes fell 1.5% in April as buying plunged in the West. The Commerce Department says new homes sold last month at a seasonally adjusted annual rate of 662,000. American Family News is online at onenewsnow.com. I'm Rusty Pugh.
Abraham Hamilton III.
God put us in this world at this time to be salt and light. We don't fold because of the darkness that we're facing. This is not the first time in the world's history that it's gotten dark. God has called you and I to be his ambassadors, even in this dark moment.
Tune in to the Hamilton Corner, weekdays at 5 p.m. Central on Urban Family Talk. Welcome to Stacy on the Right with your host, Stacy Washington.
Love is everlasting, love is only kind, love is.
Welcome to the show, everybody. Stacy Washington, host of Stacy on the Right, here on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk. Welcome to the show. No diggity, no doubt. We're back. And it's, the middle of the week. And we have so much going on right now. So much going on. So we're getting ready for the TV launch. We're going to be on cable. We're going to be all over the place. You'll be able to look at us on your Roku box. And so it's going to be so fun because in addition to our terrestrial radio listeners in 20 states across the country, we will be able to reach out to millions of viewers in homes with this same good message of the gospel and Christian conservatism and, political activism, because we have to render unto Caesar that which is Caesar. So I'm so excited about that. I'll have more updates for you on that. And then, of course, we'll have some other fun offerings that are going to be exploding onto the scene. So keep your eyes and ears peeled. Welcome to the show. You can go to afr.net or urbanfamilytalk.com. In fact, go to both and check out the work that we're doing over there. Good writing, good articles, other hosts that you can listen to and check out their podcasts. And then You can go to stacyontheright.com and hit the subscribe button and join thousands of other people who are getting the newsletter and loving it. Don't forget to open it up when you get the newsletter. There's cool stuff in there. So today on the show, we're going to speak to Amber Smith, former Deputy Assistant to the Secretary of Defense. And we have Brian Fisher, who is, he's of Human Coalition. He's been here before. He's been on the program before, so it's been really good. So we also have a discussion about this guy. So he's 30 years old, and he lives at home with his parents. And it's unclear in all the articles that I read over the course of the past 24 hours about this dude. Actually, it's not been 24 hours. It's been about 16 hours because it was late yesterday when this story broke. I found it this morning. I saw the little tweet about it yesterday, but I really looked into it this morning and thought, is this real? Is this guy for real? So he's 30. He'll be 31 in just a few weeks. And it looks as if he's maybe been living at home for the past 8 years. Can't really tell. He says he just recently lost custody of his son. So he does have a child. And apparently at one point he was working and living on his own outside the house. And he has now been, over the past few months, since January, his parents, who own the house where he lives, have been asking him to leave, to move out. They even offered him money. They gave him $1,100 and said, listen, can you go? And so then they started writing him letters because he just wouldn't leave. He spent the money that they gave him to put it as a deposit on an apartment. And so they just were like, well, we'll just evict you. So they moved to evict him and found out that in New Jersey, and I believe that's where this story takes place, it's actually Syracuse, New York. Not New Jersey, Syracuse, New York. So he's in Syracuse, and in Syracuse, the law is that in order to evict a family member, you actually have to have a judge hear the case and give the eviction order. You can't just evict them in the regular process that most landlords use for tenants they're unrelated to. So they took the extra steps needed and spent the money to get before a judge, and it's State Supreme Court Justice Donald Greenwood. He's the one who presided over the case, and he tried everything he could to convince the 30-year-old guy to move out of his parents' Camillus house on his own. So Camillus is the part of New York where this is all happening. And so they are in court for like an hour and a half. And the son, Michael Rotondo, is going back and forth with the judge, and he's trying to make the case that even if he's required to leave, he should have 6 months in which to do so. Not 90 days, but 6 months. So the judge is like, no, you're going to have to go. You have to leave. You have to move out. He asked the parents to give him an order. So the parents have to draft an order of eviction so that the judge can sign it, making it official, meaning that he has to go. Now, Rotondo, the 30-year-old son, after the court appearance, he goes out into the hallway and he calls all of the press over and begins to restyle his hair. He has past the shoulder length hair. So he's pulling it back into a ponytail very elaborately while he's explaining that he wants 30 days so that he can appeal the case because he feels that he gave precedent to the judge after doing a Google search that if it's a family member, they get 6 months because that was a ruling that a judge gave to someone else in a previous case. But the judge said, oh, great job, great job for doing that research, but it's actually not applicable here. There's another case that overrides that one that says that all they need to do is come before a judge and they can evict you unless there are intervening circumstances, and there aren't any in this case. There's nothing wrong with you. You're able-bodied. You're not, mentally disabled, so you should go and find your own place. So he's in there for about 30 minutes. Rotondo didn't deny that his parents had given him multiple orders to leave. And now it's the New York Post, Fox News, BBC. Here we are on this show talking about it. It even made the Late Late Show with James Corden. And there were like 6 camera crews there at the courthouse for the hearing because this is such an unusual case. It's not the only time parents have ever sued to make their child move out, but this is, really interesting because the guy is 30 and he's so obviously mentally capable of taking care of himself. So the judge actually entertained this idea that he needed more time and that he was entitled to it, but he said it's outrageous, that he feels he needs 6 more months. Rotundo then returned the judge's, kind of insult and said, it's outrageous that you expect me to leave. And then the judge asked Rotundo, listen, can you talk to your parents about this? Like, you guys are all in the same room. We're here together. You have the ability to talk to them. They have the ability. Why don't you talk to them and figure out, an agree upon, like, instead of you being evicted immediately, why don't you guys talk? I'll give you time right here in the courtroom. Just step aside, huddle together, have a discussion. And when you do that, you can come up with a date that works for everyone. So instead of me just saying you're evicted and you have, this many days or whatever applicable amount of time it is for you to gather your belongings, you can figure it out with them. And Rotundo flat out denied it. The 30-year-old son said, no, I'm not going to talk to them. So when asked about the circumstances, like, how are you living? Are you in the basement? Where are you living at? Dude is actually living in a bedroom. He says he has a job, a home-based business that he runs, but he refused to elaborate on what it was. And he said that he and his parents no longer speak to each other. They don't do his laundry. They don't provide food for him, but he lives there rent-free and, does not speak to them at all. Like, they have no communication. So he refused to talk to the parents about the situation and come to an arrangement. And so when the judge realized that was going on, he said, look, you're gonna have to go. So the judge ordered that he leave. Now, what's interesting is that in this news story, I found a number of news stories that I read, but the most interesting one to me was here on this website, Syracuse.com. It's, one of the websites that covers all of the news in Syracuse, New York. And their reporter was very specific in his observations about Michael Rotundo. He said nothing was too small to attract Rotundo's attention. A notice incorrectly listed the room for today's appearance. Rotundo demanded an adjournment due to the mix-up. The judge said, yeah, but you made it just fine, so no adjournment. Rotundo's parents sat quietly, while Michael Rotundo, the 30-year-old, appeared to crave the spotlight. At one point, the judge said, hey, step up here. I want to talk to you for a second. And so this is where the judge, it's basically a sidebar. If you guys have ever watched Law and Order, they ask for a sidebar and you step up to the front and there's no microphone involved. It's an off-the-record discussion. Nobody else gets to know what's being said except the judge and whoever got called up there. Well, Rotundo goes up to the judge's bench, and on the way, he tried to take the podium with the microphones with him to make sure that everyone could hear what he and the judge were talking about. And the judge was like, don't bring those microphones. He said, but these are the media microphones. We need to bring these up here. So, weird. And then afterwards, of course, as I mentioned, he talked to the camera crews, the six news organizations that showed up. He lambasted the judge's eviction order. He asked if so the reporters asked him, do you feel like you're spending more time fighting the eviction than you're spending on trying to find an apartment for yourself? Or, his parents even wrote him a letter and said, even someone with a spotty work history like yours can find a job in today's market. Jobs are plentiful, and you can use an Airbnb for temporary lodgings because Airbnb exists. So there's no excuse for you to stay here when we don't want you here. That's what the parents said to him. So he noted that his parents didn't support him by providing food or doing his laundry. He insisted that they were providing him housing and that's it. And he basically said, look, I need 6 more months. He's not willing to entertain anything less than 6 more months at his parents' house, even though they don't want him there. So I thought that was an interesting story. Now, a lot of people are trying to make this about millennials, and they're trying to make it about this group of people or that group of people. I see it completely differently. This is not an indictment on millennials. Do you know how many millennials are out there killing it, saving money, investing, that have almost paid off all their student loans or came out of college with no student loans? How many millennials have written books and are leaders in, huge multinational corporations? This is not a slam on millennials that this one guy can't seem to be shoehorned out of his parents' house. It's more a statement about what happened with him and his parents. Like, how did they get to this place? And family is complicated. I saw online the other day, it was a little meme, and it was posted for fun, but it kind of rang true for me anyway, that family are the people that you wouldn't spend any time with or wouldn't be friends with except for the fact that they're your family. And so I know I don't have that relationship with all of my family. I certainly am not saying that, I don't want to be around my family, but I do. How many times have you talked to someone who'll say, oh, we just have the most complicated, difficult relationships? And that's because you're family. And so you have this couple who appear to be otherwise normal. The picture of the house that they live in looks normal. It looks like it's a normal suburban middle-class neighborhood. The guy himself, he wore a suit to court. He has the long, ridiculous hair and a really interesting affect. Like, he loved the fact that there were cameras there. But other than that, he doesn't seem like he's mentally incapacitated or any kind of mental illness. And so you have to wonder, what happened with these people? Like, what were they like when he was living at home as a child and then as a young adult? What were they like as he was going through this situation where he's bouncing from job to job and kind of creating a normalcy for himself that meant he couldn't support himself? What were they doing then? Were they enabling him? Were they tough? What happened? And so what brought them to this place? It's a fascinating story. It's been trending on Twitter. Lots going on there. So anyway, that was I was drawn into this story this morning as I was pulling other information and trying to catch up on the news. So I want to let you guys listen to this ICE official. This is a pivot over to immigration. And this is a key issue for President Trump. You've got this immigration and customs enforcement official. He's testifying before Congress, and some Democrat who I guess her statement was so horrible that I couldn't find any news outlet that had actually recorded her portion of the statement. But this ICE official dropped the hammer. And I'm not talking about a regular hammer. I'm talking about he dropped Thor's hammer on this chick for saying that immigrations and customs officials are anti-immigrant. Here it is. It's number one.
Can I respond to the speech that was made?
Absolutely.
First of all, no one on this panel is anti-immigrant. We're law enforcement officers who enforce the law that you all enacted. So to sit there and say that we're anti-immigrants is wrong. We are enforcing laws. If you think it's okay to enter this country legally and they shouldn't be arrested, that's just wrong. The laws clearly state enter the country legally is a crime. And no one's up here saying all illegal aliens are criminals. A certain percentage of them are criminals. They commit yet another offense after they're here. I've said many times, I certainly understand the plight of these people, and I feel bad for some of these people. But I have a job to do. I have to enforce law and uphold the oath that I took to enact the laws enacted by you, Congress.
So that bit there, that's the truth. And so, often on this program, we will talk about the overabundance of government officials who work for the federal government, 24 million people employed by the federal government, and how outrageous that is. And I often will express sympathy for the immigrations and customs enforcement guys because they have such a difficult job to do. But you just heard that from the mouth of one of these officials. Not only do they not have an anti-immigrant posture, they have a lot of sympathy for the people who come through their doors, who come through their enforcement arena. But they are tasked with following the law. Law passed by Congress, signed into law by previous presidents, which means they're duty-bound to abide by it. It's crazy that the Democrats have adopted this posture that anyone who wants to follow the rule of law is anti-immigrant. That's another lie from the pit of hell, and it needs to be called out. There, I just did. We'll be back with our first guest after these messages. Stay there.
Hi, I'm Will Addison.
And I'm Miki.
From Airing the Addisons on Urban Family Talk.
We'd like to invite you to the Marriage, Family, and Life Conference coming up August 17th and 18th.
The list of speakers is amazing. We have Ryan Baumberger of the Radiance Foundation, Dr. Clarence Schuler of Building Lasting Relationships, Abraham Hamilton III, Pastor Bert Harper and his wife Jan, Stacy Washington, Lonnie Poindexter, Pastor Dexter Sanders, and we'll be there too.
There's a direct attack by the enemy on marriage and family, and babies in the womb are treated like political footballs instead of life. We want to encourage and equip the body of Christ to fight for the restoration of the family. If we can get our families on track, a lot of society's problems could be solved. The Marriage, Family, and Life Conference is from Urban Family Communications, a division of the American Family Association. You can learn more and register at urbanfamilytalk.com.
Hi, I'm Crawford Loritz with a Legacy Moment. Sometimes I've got too much going on. You've probably been there too. In order for me not to forget stuff, I need to be reminded. My wife, Karen, might call me to remind me of something. I've been known to leave notes in prominent places around the house or in my car. And where would I be without my administrative assistant or reminders on my phone? Some things are way too important to forget. In Numbers chapter 15, verses 37 through 41, God underscores that we need to remember and be reminded of these very crucial things. Listen to these words. The Lord also spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the sons of Israel, and tell them that they shall make for themselves tassels on the corners of their garments throughout their generations, that they shall put on the tassel of each corner a cord of blue. It shall be a tassel for you to look at and remember all the commandments of the Lord, so as to do them. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out from the land of Egypt to be your God. I am the Lord your God." God said, do something physical. The blue tassel was God's visible reminders. Basically, he says, remember the commandment of the Lord. Stay in the word of God. Remember to obey God. That tassel says, don't do what you want to do what God says. Also remember your sole allegiance is to God. God says, I am the Lord your God. Don't let your heart be divided. Let it be completely yielded to me. Well, here's what I want you to remember and do today. Keep a prayer journal. Go back to it often. It will remind you of what you need to continue to do.
Join Crawford Loritz tomorrow for another Legacy Moment.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on Urban Family Talk.
All right, you guys, we're back. And right before we touch on our next guest, which I'm so excited to speak with her, we are going to take a quick call from Stacy in California. Welcome to Stacy on the Right, and thanks for calling the show.
Hi.
Hi.
My name is Stacy, and I wanted to make a comment about illegal immigration and the public schools.
Sure.
Well, I just wanted to say that I'm here in California, and I've been here my whole entire life, and I've always loved the state of California. But I have grown to hate the state of California. I am living like in fear all the time. I've never felt this way at all. The immigration issue here is just outrageous. And the public schools are just overcrowded with illegal aliens. And my son, he didn't graduate on time, but he did go back right after to pick up the credits he needed to get his GED. And the school that he was attending was just so overcrowded with the children and that were illegal aliens. And I'm just saddened about the state of California. I am totally with President Trump on what he's doing concerning illegal aliens. And I think that African-American people need to understand that they should be in support of what President Trump is doing concerning illegal aliens. And it's just heartbreaking to see the black people who are not on board with him, because we are being the ones affected by this issue the most. And here in California, it's just terrible what's going on here. I catch the bus. I don't have a car, and I come across these people who are beginning to be pushy and abusive towards me. Not all, but some, because of what they're going through. They're taking it out on the black people here, and they're causing problems for us. And, they are overcharging people, and people are not paying attention. I went to Bank of America to get $200 out of the bank, and the woman was a Mexican teller, and she would not give me the amount of money that I wanted. She tried to cheat me, and I asked for the manager. The manager was Hispanic, and she went along with the program of the teller, and they threatened to call the police on me because I got loud about it.
I'm gonna cut you off. I do appreciate the call. We have a guest who's waiting in the queue to come on. I definitely sympathize with you about the educational issues, and the numbers support what you're saying. I just want to give a quick statistic for people who are listening who might think that this caller, who happens to be Black, is maybe biased against illegal aliens. She lives in the state of California. Last reports out have California spending $21.8 billion a year on illegal immigration, illegal aliens, and supporting and caring for them. That's just the fact. So when she talks about the different scenarios, I can't comment on the banking institution, but the different things where it's just a lot of people who are there who are taking the services and kind of crowding out people who are citizens, that's a fact. So it's really difficult for people to cope with, and they shouldn't have to, because we should have a priority to have citizens accessing our services if need be, as opposed to bringing people in from other countries who are not contributing to the tax base, but are indeed using the services. So thank you so much for the call, Stacey. I appreciate that. Right now, it's my pleasure to welcome Amber Smith, former Deputy Assistant to the Secretary of Defense, founder and president of Beacon Rock Strategies, author of the best-selling book, Danger Close, My Epic Journey as a Combat Helicopter Pilot in Iraq and Afghanistan. Amber, thank you for joining the show today.
Thank you. It's great to be with you, Stacey.
It's great to speak to you, too. So Demetrius doesn't have what we're talking about today. Are we doing news of the day? What's our topic?
Sure, absolutely. Ask me anything you like.
Well, first, let's talk about your book, Danger Close, My Epic Journey as a Combat Helicopter Pilot in Iraq and Afghanistan. That makes you a little bit like you're one of those hardcore chicks who you fly helicopter. You know, it's not often you meet someone who's like, yeah, what did you do? I flew helicopters in war. That's a thing. Tell us about that.
So I started flight school at Fort Rucker, Alabama back in 2003. And at least for me, it doesn't seem like 2003 is that long ago. But actually, when I started flying in the light attack helicopter community, women were still pretty rare back then. And so there were very few women who flew those helicopters back in the day. But I will say that by the time I left the military, I left the Army in 2010 in August, that there was a pretty good representation of women by that point. So they were definitely having stronger numbers by the time I left.
Well, I know in the civilian world, lots of women fly helicopters. It's not as different, to fly a civilian helicopter. For, news organizations have women who report from the skies and man helicopters for traffic and weather and tourist type helicopters, all that good stuff. But for combat, that's a completely different arena. So when you were in Iraq and Afghanistan flying helicopters, what kind of work did you do?
So I was an OH-58 Delta Kiowa Warrior helicopter pilot. And a Kiowa is sort of the unknown aircraft of the post-9/11 wars, but we really were essential to combat success on the battlefield every single day with both of those wars. So what our mission was we were to support ground forces. So we conducted reconnaissance, security, operations, close combat attacks. So one day we may be flying aerial security for a convoy that's driving from point A to point B, and we're out in front of the convoy hunting for IEDs, improvised explosive devices. Another day we might be looking for the enemy in the mountain of Afghanistan, reporting it back to ground forces who are in the local vicinity to ensure they're keeping them safe. Or we might be responding to a troops in contact where we are flying in to a enemy attack, essentially, where ground guys are taking fire on the ground, and we then provide aerial firepower, you could say, because we have a 50 cal machine gun. We have a rocket pod that carries 7 high explosive rockets, and we have the capability of carrying Hellfire missiles as well. So we're a little mini gunship that flies extremely low level and support for every friendly ground force you can think of.
Wow. So, okay, you did that. And as a pilot, you were an officer?
I was a warrant officer. So I actually was at the University of Washington in Seattle I started in 2000 and was there. 9/11 happened and really opened my eyes up to service to our country and wanting to be a part of something greater and really contributing at a time when I felt my country needed me most. And so from there, I looked into all of the military flight programs because I knew I wanted to fly. I came from a flying family where everybody is literally a pilot in my family. And so I looked at all the flight programs, and the Army had one that was a perfect fit for me because, I talked to all the branches of service, and they all said, great, you want to be a pilot or try out to be a pilot, finish your 4-year degree, and then come back and talk to us. Well, I kind of had my mind made up already that I didn't want to wait around. So the Army had a program called the Warrant Officer Flight Program that allows you to, if you get selected for the program, you get to go in without a 4-year degree, and then you have the option of getting your 4-year degree while you're in. So that's what I did with a couple of years of college under my belt. I then joined the military, finished my degree while I was active duty.
Wow. So, okay, my dad was active duty Army. He was enlisted, military police. And I remember him having some of his guys, they would go to college at night and then they would go warrant officer. And I remember that like so distinctly because it was like 1 second they were in the company and my dad was, in leadership over them. And the next second they've gone to warrant officer training school and they're back. And they're not officers from the traditional sense, but they are officers now because they've gone to school and they've completed that training. So it's fascinating to hear that you use that program to get into flight school and to become a pilot the fastest way possible. So what would you say for those of us who I've actually been to the Middle East before while I was on active duty. I was enlisted, but I didn't fly or anything like that. I've been there to Saudi Arabia, and I remember what it was like listening to the pilots get locked onto and supporting them on the ground and everything they were doing during Operation Desert Shield. But you're talking about a much more recent conflict. You're talking about something that was completely different from that because that was a peacetime operation. And what would you say to someone civilians listening, people who are, regular Americans who are listening to this, and they're wondering what was the most fascinating thing or the thing that shocked you the most about your time in the Middle East or the thing that you would want people to know about it?
About the Middle East specifically? Well, a question that I often get asked is about, how are the wars different? So Iraq versus Afghanistan. I was in Iraq from 2005 to 2006, and then I was in Afghanistan from 2008 to 2009. And for some context, of course, I'm going to have different experiences as a Kiowa Warrior helicopter pilot versus a infantryman on the ground. So obviously two completely separate types of combat experience. But for me, what I really get into my book, Danger Close, is I talk about how when I went over to Iraq in 2005, I think I was 23 years old, so I was young for a helicopter pilot. Most of the people were around that my colleagues that I flew with were around 10 years older than me. So I was young, I was naive to war, I was brand new to the Army. I only had a couple hundred hours flying a helicopter. So essentially I was brand new to everything, and then throw combat and war on top of that, and you really either sink or swim. You learn to, tread water and learn every single day and progress, or you kind of are gonna sink. So I made a decision really fast after getting over there that I was going to have to work really hard and become a part of the team and work for it. And I will say that it is a challenge to become a helicopter pilot. You get tested every single day, but it also, you learn so much about yourself in terms of what you are capable of. So I had that entire year of growth when it comes to, I went to Iraq as one person and I left as another because of the amount of growth I had as a person, as a warrant officer, as a pilot, and I became a pilot in command, which means you are the captain of the aircraft, you could say, for civilian speak. And then going to Afghanistan about 15 months later, it was a completely different experience in terms of the war because you know how long a year can be. You have a complete turnover of new people, so you're one of the more senior combat experienced people, and you see the war through a different set of lenses. In terms of like tactics and operations, they're two completely separate wars, two separate enemies, two separate types of fighting tactics, different terrain, different hazards that you faced on a different day. When I was in Iraq, we would get mortared and rocketed every single day at our FOB while we were actually there. When we got to Afghanistan, we did not get rocketed or mortared every single day on our base, but when we took off and flew outside the wire into the enemy territory, the actual contact with the enemy was much greater on a daily basis, where, when you went out on a mission, you knew you were going to get in a fight, so to speak, with the enemy. So two completely separate wars. I think for Americans, I have found that a lot of people are very interested in the differences between the two wars, because I think it's easy to think like, oh, Iraq and Afghanistan and kind of blend in together. But when you've, fought in both wars, there's two completely separate battlefields, enemies, wars, two completely different things going on in both of those nations.
Yeah, I agree. It sounds like it's all the Middle East, but it is different. The factors at play there are very different. And so I have so many things I want to ask you, but I do want to touch on, we've talked about your book, Danger Close. I mentioned in the introduction that you were former deputy assistant to the Secretary of Defense, and then founder and president of Beacon Rock Strategies. So what is Beacon Rock Strategies, and what do you guys do?
So Beacon Rock Strategies, it's a communications and leadership consulting firm where we really take so it's basically the intersection between leadership and communication. A lot of times leaders have potential to be great, but they're not using one of the key factors to becoming a great leader, which is communication, to their benefit. So not reaching their full potential as a leader. So basically work with senior leaders, politicians, candidates, companies, executives, and come up with strategies to really maximize their business productivity, connection with their audience, and then internally teamwork, employee retention, because internal communication is as important as external.
Fascinating. Okay, so I want to say thank you for your service to our nation. We cannot thank you enough for that. And I just think it's so awesome that you, after 9/11, you made a decision that you were going to go do something amazing, and you wouldn't let anybody stop you. You took the most direct route, and you've accomplished that, and now you're back in the private sector doing even more amazing things. So thank you for your time today. It's been great to chat with you.
Thank you for your service too, Stacey, and for having me on. Great to chat.
Great to chat. Talk again soon. That's Amber Smith, former Deputy Assistant to the Secretary of Defense, and a whole bunch of other cool stuff, except, that she was a helicopter pilot, combat pilot. So cool. So cool. So we'll be back with more. We're going to listen to Nigel Farage take it into the president of Facebook. Yeah, right here on the show. We're going to listen to that audio and some more cool stuff. So stay there.
The Capital One commercial will forever be etched in the ear of the listener. What's in your wallet is a phrase that won't easily be forgotten. But this is not a Capital One plug. I want you to think about the people that are in your circle of influence. Who's in your circle is my new catchphrase, simply because we don't think enough about the people or spirits that we allow into our personal space. Negativity is contagious and fatal. Misery loves company, and it's fatal to your hopes and dreams. I think we all know something someone who, no matter what good has happened, always has something negative to say. Ugh, that really bothers me. That bad attitude and that pessimistic spirit will only cause you to do the same. There's no room for doubt, especially if you're believing God to bring that vision to fruition. Now, this is not a license for you to be mean. It is, however, a license for you to assess who's in your circle and make the necessary adjustments. With a heart for the urban family, I'm today's urban woman, Tony Johnson. Connect with us at urbanfamilytalk.com.
Coming next week on The Dwelling Place. Pastor Al Pittman continues to walk us through the Bible, line by line and verse by verse, to let God show us just how timeless His truth is. That's next week on The Dwelling Place.
Victory McIntosh.
Early will I seek thee, O Lord. Man, it's something about when you start your morning off right with Abba, Father. I'm telling you, will the enemy come? Of course, he's going to do his job. But it should motivate you even more. Man, I got to stay connected to the vine of Jesus. How do you do that? By getting into the Word of God. You got to do it.
Tune in to Word on the Street with Victory McIntosh. Saturdays at 9 a.m. and 9 p.m. Central on Urban Family Talk. Stacy Washington.
And so to this day, I don't eat green beans. If they bring me a plate of food at a restaurant and they've substituted green beans for some other vegetable because the other vegetable is out of season, I will make them bring me a saucer and remove the green beans from my plate and take them off of the table because I cannot abide green beans. And so Chuck Schumer and the Democrats have to sit down to the table and it's loaded up high with green beans and they have to stay there until they've eaten them all. That's the table they set. They boiled the green beans, they picked them, they snapped them, they put them into the steamer, they've cooked them, they seasoned them with salt and pepper, and now they're on the table with a little side of butter, and that's all they're getting, and they're going to have to eat these until they win.
Stacy on the Right. Weekday afternoons at 2 Central on Urban Family Talk. Welcome back to Stacy on the Right.
Mr. Zuckerberg, I'm the largest user of Facebook in all the EU institutions in terms of followers, in terms of engagement, so I'm your best client here in the room. I've no idea of the value of that, but I'm pleased to see you, as I hope you are me. The one slight problem I have, and I'm watching very carefully the testimony that you gave on Capitol Hill. Time and again, people asked you, is this genuinely a neutral political platform? And you come up with the same line again and again. It's well crafted. You say that Facebook is a platform for all ideas. Now, historically, of course, it's true that through Facebook and other forms of social media, there is no way that Brexit or Trump or the Italian elections could ever possibly have happened. It was social media that allowed people to get round the back of mainstream media. Now, perhaps you're horrified by this creation of yours and what it's led to. I don't know. But what is absolutely true is that since January of this year, you've changed your modus operandi, you've changed your algorithms, and it has led directly to a very substantial drop in views and engagements for those that have got right of centre political opinions. The facts are very clear. Just look at President Trump's numbers on a much smaller scale. Look at mine. Look at thousands of other conservative commentators. And on average, we're down about 25% over the course of this year.
He's right. So that's Nigel Farage. And remember, we previewed this for you a couple weeks ago. We talked about how the EU and specifically Great Britain were very excited and very interested in the fact that Mark Zuckerberg would be in Europe, and they wanted to make sure that he didn't come through their region of the world without stopping in for some grilling in their parliament. And so that's what's happening here. You hear Nigel Farage just really laying into him, and you should see, like, if go to my Twitter feed, I've posted the link. The face that Mark Zuckerberg is making while this is being said to him, he's on the hot seat, and honestly, he deserves it. Like, If it were just that they were getting rid of fake accounts and fake news stories, anything that was violent, that'd be fine. But there are plenty of sites on Facebook that are still up and running that death to Israelis, death to Jews, all kinds of horrible things about Jewish people posted by people in Middle Eastern countries and people in America, hateful anti-Semitic views left up, but conservative sites completely clamped down. So you can reach a few of your followers, but you just can't get the same thing going you could a few months ago. And this isn't a user issue where, you know, there's just not enough bandwidth left for all of the conservatives to communicate. They're just tamping down because he's ashamed that his platform actually played a role in the election of the president. He's not ashamed that it played a huge role in electing Barack Obama, though. Only ashamed that we were able to say, oh, so that worked for President Obama. Well, it can work for the next Republican president. And that's what we did. It'll probably play a huge role in the election of the next president. It's that social media is going to play a huge role unless he turns out to be as partisan as he appears to be, which means that it should be broken up the same way Southwestern Bell was. And so a lot of you in the listening audience may remember, a lot of you may be too young to remember Southwestern Bell. They were the baby bells, and then they all gleamed and glommed together and became Southwestern Bell, the big, huge parent company. And it was so big, and the monopoly was so strong, and there were no options available. It was as if there was no, like, if you say Southwestern Bell, that meant telephone. And so what they did was the government said, you got to break this thing up. And it did spur competition. It did enable other companies to enter the market, and it meant that pricing started to reflect the market and what was available to Americans improved. I kind of feel like, and I'm like Nigel Farage in this, my answer to every problem is not, well, let's get the government involved. In fact, it's the opposite for me. I always feel like the private sector is more creative and more nimble, more readily able to adapt to the changing scenarios that are present in a business environment than the federal government. But in this case, you know, there is a reason why we have a government, and it does exist to protect the rights of individual Americans. And in this instance, where we see a company that says with its mouth, the mouthpiece of the company, namely Mark Zuckerberg, says that it's a neutral platform for ideas, no political partisanship, but the only people being punished for having any ideas are those who are on the right side of the political spectrum, and there is no competition, no viable competition can exist, then yeah, maybe it's time to break it up, you know, to make it like not the only thing that's available. And I know there are other things out there, but they're not allowed to grow and to compete with Facebook because Facebook buys its competitors or it crushes them by copying their business model. So Nigel Farage had more to say. So here's number 3.
Probably somebody that calls for legislation on the international stage, but I'm beginning to wonder whether we need a social media bill of rights to basically protect free speech. And I'm asking you today very, very clearly that would you accept that today Facebook is not a platform for all ideas that is operated impartially?
There were a couple of questions about political bias that I want to touch on because I think that this is a very important topic. As a couple of you mentioned, we are committed to being a platform for all ideas. That means that we want to make it so that people can come to our service and share any idea across the political spectrum. It's very important to me that we're a service that allows for a wide variety of political discourse. We view that as a big part of our responsibility, and I can commit to you here today that we have never and will not make decisions about what content is allowed or how we do ranking on the basis of a political orientation. So that's an important philosophical point for me that I'm proud to be able to commit to. There was a specific point around distribution and reduction of seeing people's content. And on that, what I'd just say is we've made a number of changes this year to make sure that we're showing people's friends and family and community content more than public content in general. So a lot of the feedback that we've heard from people is that they come to Facebook because they want to stay connected to people. We've also done a lot of well-being research. This wasn't a topic that came up today, but we're very focused on making sure that people's use of technology is good for people's well-being.
Oh my goodness, you guys. So, in other words, he's your dad. You can't use the platform the way you want to. He's done some research and he's decided that what's good for you is that if you see more posts from friends and family. But what if your friends and family are posting political things? Well, you're still not going to see that because he wants you to look at the pictures of the babies, et cetera. And hey, right over here in this quadrant that you're looking at, I love to see the babies of my friends on Facebook. It is one of my favorite things to scroll through my news feed and see the babies, who's having a baby, who's pregnant, to see the baby bumps, to see the new house, new apartment. I fixed up my shed, look at my new garden. We landscaped. I love all of that. But that doesn't mean that if someone has liked a page, like I've liked some pages on Facebook, if I've liked that page, I want to see that too. I didn't like it just for the act of liking it, but never seeing what the page posts. If I just want to check in on it occasionally, I'll just check in on it occasionally. I don't have to like it. But if I want to see what they're posting, I will like the page, choose to get their notifications. And he's saying, well, yeah, but I know what's good for you, Stace. What's good for you is to see more of your friends' posts. And I have a lot of people that post fantastic things. I can't complain about any of the things that people are posting, is when someone posts something I don't like, I just I don't want to be friends with people who are posting things that are vulgar, or I had one friend who's just posted pictures of spiders all the time. And so I had to unfriend that person. It's just, it's personal preference and it's Facebook. Come on. So I think it's interesting that his response is, yeah, we're a neutral public platform and we know you're concerned about censorship, but what we're trying to do is we're trying to help people be better and we know what's best for them. And so the way we think they should be better is what's best. And so we're going to do that. It's like he's the de facto dictator of all of the internet, at least the part that's owned by Facebook, which is a considerable sized chunk of the internet. So now I want to pivot over. Call lines are open 866-963-2037. But we have had this heated exchange between a black member of Congress. He was interviewing Secretary Mike Pompeo. And they were talking about diplomatic security and the spending on that, because Pompeo is presenting a budget pertaining to, it partially pertains to the spending for diplomatic security. And so Meeks is the name of this guy. He's really laying into Pompeo. And I want you to hear this because it's funny to me that when it's a Republican in the hot seat, this is the way they get spoken to. But when it's a Democrat in the hot seat, they're spoken to sternly, but they're never treated with this much contempt and disrespect. It's number 6.
From your mouth at that time, at that testimony. So I went back and I looked at your testimony, Mr. Secretary, when you were before the Senate for confirmation. I waited patiently here listening to your testimony here today, Mr. Secretary. I have not heard you mention one single time about diplomatic security. Not once. Not once. And then, I know at the time, and we're trying not to play, I'm with my colleague playing politics across but we're here on Howard soil, so I think we've got to get to the facts of the matter. And on the facts of the matter, we heard the Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy at the time say that it was about bringing Hillary Clinton down. And so I hear that maybe giving you the benefit of the doubt, if it wasn't about bringing Hillary Clinton down at the time, then I ask you, Mr. Secretary, should we conclude that because you've not mentioned it one time, not once, should we conclude based upon that fact that you do not care about diplomatic security, Mr. Secretary? Haven't heard it from you. Not once.
No. You should not conclude that.
I'll take you at your word.
If I may respond.
I'll take you at your word. You said no. I take you at your word.
No, but I feel like I need at least a few.
But I only have 5 minutes, so I'm gonna take you at your word. You'll have time. I'm gonna take you at your word.
You should know
because I happen to agree with you.
The briefing I received as a nominee was from the.
So I cut it off there because they kind of talked over each other, and it was really a shameful display by Representative Meeks. It was, he's from New York. He's a Democrat. He just talked over him, and Pompeo tried to get in a few, just a sentence or two edgewise. And finally, the chair I guess he realized this was out of control. He stepped in, and Meeks tried to use Maxine Waters, reclaiming my time. I'm reclaiming my time. He tried to use that, but it just didn't work for him. So they went back and forth for a little bit, and then it was explained to the member that the Pompeo would be allowed to respond. He would have to be permitted to reply to the statements that were made to him and questions that were put to him. And so then Meeks got to the point. The point of the questioning was not that he cares anything about diplomatic security, that he's concerned about any other American stationed abroad on diplomatic missions on behalf of the United States being killed as they were in Benghazi, Libya. No, it's not about safety. It's not about the budget. It's about protecting his homegirl, Hillary Clinton, someone who thinks he is someone who should be brought to heel, someone who thinks that he and his children are natural born predators. And please miss me with this idea that Hillary Clinton said that about certain black people and she didn't mean it about all of us. Just miss me with that. So here he is launching into Pompeo about Hillary Clinton. I mean, it's as if there's something we don't know about the two of them. It's number 7.
$1 billion went to diplomatic security. But once President Trump came in, I see it went down to $2.1 billion, and fiscal year 19 down to $1.6 billion. So the budget or the money for diplomatic security has gone down about 45% from the Obama administration. So where is the concern now, other side of the aisle, of this administration about diplomatic security?
Diplomatic security is not about dollars expended. It's about delivering real security. It's about getting the right outcomes. It's about having the right people in place. It's about being thoughtful about where you put people. We're going to take risks. We're going to be an expeditionary State Department. I think President Trump demands it. I think each of you do as well. But I'll take a backseat to no one with respect to caring about and protecting the people that.
Nor did Hillary Clinton take a backseat to no one for what she did about diplomatic security in this country.
So you hear people going, oh, it's like, oh, did you really? Now, my only question here for anyone in the audience who's on the, the left side of the aisle, or for anybody, really, anybody who can answer, somebody, please help me understand how we're not supposed to talk about Hillary Clinton because she didn't get elected. Donald Trump did. We're not supposed to talk about Hillary Clinton because she's not the one who's doing X, Y, and Z. She used to be this, she used to be that, but now she's a private citizen, and we only need to talk about those who are in elected office now. Then how is it that Representative Meeks just wasted 5 minutes of Mike Pompeo's life talking about Hillary Clinton and defending her like she's one of his blood relatives? How is that? Because it's a double standard. That's why it's only okay to defend those that are on the left. But if you're on the right, well, throw a cup of water on you, attack you in public when you're with your parents, anything goes. Well, not over here, it doesn't. But, you just heard him. She doesn't care. She cares. She cares. All right, when we get back, we'll have hour 2 of Stacey on the Right. Stay there.
Urban Family Talk. Urban Family Talk.
There's a lot happening around us. That's why Christians need to stand strong on family values and morality. Hi, I'm Ray Rooney, editor of The Stand, a blog from the American Family Association. The Stand has timely, carefully written articles on relevant cultural issues that you can quickly forward to others. Visit afa.net/The Stand.
Truth, wisdom, empowerment. Urban Family Talk, a ministry of the American Family Association.
American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh. A U.S. Air Force jet crashed outside its base in Mississippi today, right before the Defense Secretary addressed a group of graduates. Lucas Tomlinson has more.
Both pilots ejected safely from their T-38 supersonic jet trainer before it crashed outside Columbus Air Force Base in eastern Mississippi. The T-38 is used to train Air Force pilots how to fly jets. The crash took place hours before Defense Secretary Jim Mattis gives the commencement address at the U.S. Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs, Colorado. The training jet crash comes weeks after an Air Force cargo plane crashed in Georgia, killing all 9 aboard. At the Pentagon, Lucas Tomlinson, Fox News.
A Baltimore County police officer was run down by a Jeep driven by a suspect she was trying to arrest. Steve Jordahl reports it was one death on a particularly grim day for American law enforcement.
The call sends chills down the spine of every officer within earshot.
District U43, the incident over in Parkville is going to be in Signal 13. Looks like an officer was shot and possibly stabbed.
In fact, Officer Amy Caprio had been run down. She'd been with the Baltimore County PD less than 4 years. Her chief, Terrence Sheridan, held one of the toughest press conferences in his life on Monday.
Today about 2 o'clock, we received a call at our 911 center about a possible burglary with 4 suspects. Our patrol officer responded, and from that point, she was injured, and we are now investigating this as a homicide.
Baltimore, you may remember, was the scene of the Freddie Gray riots. He died in the back of a police van in 2015. Then Mayor Stephanie Rawlings Blake was conspicuous in her lack of support for her officers, even telling the thugs that were burning down the neighborhood that she wanted to give them space to do just that. Perhaps that was in the back of Officer Caprio's mind as an unarmed black teen raced towards her. Not likely, says Jim Pasco of the National Fraternal Order of Police.
It's far more likely that it just happened too quickly for her to react, because police officers are not afraid. If they were, officers wouldn't be getting assaulted and killed, and the numbers are getting killed.
And so soon, police from around the country will be traveling to Maryland to pay their respects. But the nation's thin blue line will be stretched especially thin on that day. Officer Caprio was the third of 4 officers to die in the line of duty on Monday alone. I'm Steve Jordahl.
Did the Supreme Court give a handout this week to employers and leave workers in the cold? Chris Woodward reports it all depends on the person you ask.
In a 5-4 ruling this week, the Supreme Court said employers can prohibit their workers from banding together to complain about pay and conditions in the workplace. NPR calls it a blow to workers' rights. The New York Times considers it another ruling for business from what the Times calls a very business-friendly Supreme Court. And a Washington Post blog says the Supreme Court just made it easier on employers and harder on workers. But Hans von Spakovsky of the Heritage Foundation sees things differently.
It was a good ruling. They gave enforcement to the Federal Arbitration Act. And the Federal Arbitration Act is a very good statute that allows folks to enter into arbitration agreements in order to avoid the costly, slow process of the courts.
Spakovsky adds this does not conflict with employee rights as defined in the National Labor Relations Act.
Well, it doesn't. It just means that you can't file a class action lawsuit if you have a pay dispute. You've got to go through the arbitration process if you have an arbitration agreement with your employer. And, you know, folks who don't like that, don't like the idea of an arbitration agreement, well, they've got a choice. They don't have to work for that particular employer.
I'm Chris Woodward.
And that's American Family News for this hour, available online at onenewsnow.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download the One News Now mobile app for your Apple or Android device. I'm Rusty Pugh.
Equipped with Chris Brooks.
This program is an apologetic endeavor. We tackle news, current events, cultural trends, and phenomenons from a Christian worldview perspective. Why? Because we're looking for insights into culture that will allow us to more effectively, more contextualize the gospel so that we can reach men and women for Christ.
Get equipped with Chris Brooks.
Join me Monday through Friday at noon Central Time on Urban Family Talk.
Welcome to Stacy on the Right with your host, Stacy Washington.
Well, he's doubling down because that's what MS-13 gang members are. They're animals. What do you call somebody who comes into this country illegally, unlawfully, whose motto is rape, control, kill. It's not gumdrops, hugs, and kisses. It's a violent, brutal gang that goes across this country terrorizing American citizens. They've been caught cutting people's heads off, tearing people's actual hearts out of their own bodies. This is the type of behavior that is animalistic, and the president rightly called it out. He should be praised and lauded and heralded for calling evil what it is. Instead, Democrats have come to the defense of these monsters and instead want to call them just people that are on the wrong side of the issue. They're just misunderstood people. At the highest level of the Democrat Party, it's insane to hear what they've done. This president is going to go to New York. He's going to talk with local law enforcement officials and some elected officials as well, people in his cabinet, and have a discussion, honest with the American people, about a group of people in MS-13 that have come here and infiltrated this country by the tens of thousands, have wreaked havoc, have killed people, one of the most brutal and bloodthirsty gangs in history, rampaging this country. People need to know about it and understand that this president is demanding Congress close the loopholes in the immigration law so that we can get these people out of this country and protect the American citizens, and Democrats want no part of that.
Wow. So what are we talking about here? Well, welcome back to the program. Stacey on the right. Stacey Washington. I'm also the co-chair for Project 21, National Center for Public Policy's National Advisory Council. So good to be with you today. At Stacey on the Right on Twitter and Instagram. You'll find a bunch of the stories and pieces we're talking about today in my Twitter feed. And you were just listening to the White House, Raj Shah, speaking about this animals comment that President Trump made last week, and explaining that this isn't just something he made up for fun. The misinterpretation of it is a gross, it's malpractice. It's malpractice on the part of our media. The news organizations are actually deliberately distorting what the president said and who he was talking about, and it amounts to a defense of an indefensible group of individuals. So what are we supposed to do as Christians? I'm about to tell you. Right now, I want to just let you know we have our guest, Brian Fisher, co-founder of Human Coalition. He's going to come on in the next segment. We also have some more information about the pro-life vote that's going on in Ireland. So Ireland, in Ireland, it's illegal to have an abortion. So they have a completely pro-life legal system there. Now, it doesn't mean that people don't have abortions. What it means is it's not government sanctioned. It's not legal in their country. And so just like everything else, the purveyors of death have now injected their tentacles into the Irish society, and they want to get them to legalize abortion. And the two options that they're offering are not as barbaric as it is here in this country, where you can have an abortion all 9 months of pregnancy, but it's definitely much more radical than what the Irish are used to. And so they have a no campaign. And we've talked about it just a hair here on the program. And so they have this ad. We're going to listen to it and we're going to talk about it. And we'll take your calls as well. 866-963-2037. So what does God say about evil? Are we required as Christians to say nice things about evil? If someone is raping, beheading, and macheting other people to death, are we required to say, yeah, but they're made in the image of God? Or can we tell the truth about what they're doing? Can we characterize their behavior as animalistic? Are we required to simply turn the other cheek and look off in the other direction and allow them to keep murdering, raping, and macheting other people? Now, it goes to the heart of what you believe about whether or not God is holy and righteous and just. Do you believe that he wants you to perform verbal magic on individuals who are destroying the lives of other people? Or is it okay to just tell the truth? So that's what we're going to talk about. The first scripture I want to go through is Matthew 7, verses 15 through 20. And this scripture is used a lot. Some people use it to excuse other people's behavior, but we're gonna unpack this. So what it says is, beware of the false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves. You will know them by their fruits. Grapes are not gathered from thorn bushes, nor figs from thistles, are they? So every good tree bears good fruit, but the bad tree bears bad fruit. A good tree cannot produce bad fruit, nor can a bad tree produce good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. So then you will know them by their fruits. So the first thing we need to understand is if we're talking about MS-13, which is the discussion that was being had in an immigration roundtable where an ICE official was discussing MS-13 and their brutal rape, murder, and torture, rape, torture, and murder of a 13-year-old girl. And the president said they're animals. Now, it doesn't mean they can't be redeemed. It doesn't mean that they can't find Jesus Christ and then later become right with him. But in their current condition, the characterization that the president used was they're animals. Why did he characterize them as animals? Because they're from south of the border, or because they raped, tortured, and then killed a 13-year-old girl? So just let's use our logic here, because we're going to go back to the word in just a sec. Would God want us to condemn that behavior? Or would he say, no, we need to excuse it because those people have a spark of divinity. They are still children of God. So we'll leave that there for just a second. So what did Jesus mean when he said you will know them by their fruit? Well, it's a powerful warning that are many who come to us and say, you know, I'm a leader. I'm also a Christian, or in Nancy Pelosi's case, I'm a Christian. I'm a Catholic. That's what she'll say to you. I'm a practicing Catholic. I'm in right standing with the Catholic Church. And I believe that illegal immigration is a good. In net values, when you take away the negatives, the detracting factors, and you add in the pluses, it's a net plus. Now, that goes against what the law says, but that's what she would say to you. That's what most Democrats would say. But is it that she's saying that because she believes it's true, or because she's trying to lead you away from the truth? As Christians, we're supposed to be on guard against people who lie to us or tell us things that massage our ears, tickle our fancies, and elicit an emotional response from us in order to make us feel as if we are good and virtuous people. We're supposed to be on guard for that kind of chicanery because it is deception and it leads to a place of sin. So we have to be alert for those predators, but we have to also be alert for people who would try to convince us that even though someone is raping and torturing and macheting someone, that person is also good. That is a deception as well. So another place in the Bible, Jesus addresses the exact same thing. Luke 6:43-45. For there is no good tree which produces bad fruit, nor on the other hand a bad tree which produces good fruit. Each tree is known by its own fruit. For men do not gather figs from thorns, nor do they pick grapes from a briar bush. A good man out of the good treasure of his heart brings forth what is good, and the evil man out of the evil treasure brings forth what is evil. For his mouth speaks from that which fills his heart. So if someone or a group of people are finding children, 13-year-old girls, boys who have ratted them out, innocent people who have nothing to do with their illegal activities, they bring them in and force them to watch as they rape, mutilate, torture, and then kill, sometimes detaching body parts, sometimes ripping the people limb from limb, sometimes beheading them and then putting their body parts all over a city to be found by law enforcement and anybody just simply walking near where they've stowed these body parts. Should we then be forced to say or be coerced into saying by people who have an agenda that people who do those kinds of things are still good? They do not deserve our condemnation. They do not deserve justice because they're human beings. I don't think so. I don't think so. So we know these people by what they say. People who defend MS-13, it brings to mind Matthew 12:33-37. Either make the tree good and its fruit good, or make the tree bad and its fruit bad. For the tree is known by its fruit. You brood of vipers, how can you, being evil, speak what is good? For the mouth speaks out of that which fills the heart. The good man brings out of his good treasure what is good, and the evil man brings out of his evil treasure what is evil. But I tell you that every careless word that you speak, they shall give an accounting for it in the day of judgment. For by your words you will be justified, and in your words you will be condemned. And so I would rather be someone who is interested in bringing MS-13 to justice and preventing new MS-13 members from entering this country to rape and torture and mutilate 13-year-old girls. I would rather be on the side of preventing that and saying that their behavior and they themselves are like animals, which is an insult to animals, than to be someone who would defend that behavior and advocate for more of those same criminals to come into this country. For there will be a day when those who have defended that behavior, those who have permitted those individuals into this country, those who have advocated for the breaking of the law, those who have advocated for a leaving away from what God's word says, will have to account for every word. And so if their behavior is animalistic, I then would say they are behaving like animals. But more importantly than the characterization, I would say they do not belong here. And those that are here should be prosecuted and brought to justice. That is what I take from what has been going on here with this big argument about whether or not it's okay to call someone who has a spark of divinity an animal for behaving worse than animals. Now, I want to give you just one more little piece of information about that. What does God say about evil? God's word references evil about 568 times. 1 Samuel 15:23 says, "For rebellion is the sin of witchcraft, and stubbornness is as iniquity and idolatry. Because you have rejected the word of the Lord, he has also rejected you from being king." Now, this verse obviously is very specific. God is speaking to an individual in the Bible about not becoming king because of their behavior. But we can take from that statement that when we reject God's word and we pull away from his guidance and leadership, when we say, you know what, we don't need you, God. We're taking you out of our schools. We're taking you out of our workplaces. We're not going to permit you to be in the public square. We don't want references of you on television. It's an experiment that someone asked me to do, and I couldn't believe how dead on it was. If you want to understand how completely we've erased God from our public areas, but mainly the television, because that was the public square until the advent of social media. Tonight, if you watch an hour of TV a night or 2 hours of TV a night, whatever your habit is, just put a little piece of paper next to you and put a pen there. And every time you hear a reference to God that is not blasphemy or cursing, any kind of reference to God, Christianity, the Bible, anything like that, just make a little tick mark. I mean, I've done this experiment. I've gone with my little piece of paper with no tick mark for days on end. There are no Christians represented on television. If they are, they're the bad guys. And when God's name comes up, it's someone taking it in vain or someone using it as a form of profanity. We've done that. We've allowed that to happen. And now we're wondering about the school shootings. Now we're wondering about the rebellion in our children. We're wondering about the new Gallup poll that just came out today that says people who identify as LGBTQ have gone from, remember, 10, 15 years ago, it was less than 3%. It was like 1.8% has been the norm over time for hundreds of millennia, like hundreds of years that they've been surveying how many people in your population are gay. It's always been about 1.8%, less than 2%. We're at 4.5% now, according to Gallup. 4.5% of Americans identify as LGBTQ something. So, idolatry, witchcraft, hatred, variance, emulations, wrath, strife, seditions, heresies. That's what we're hearing out of our houses of government. That's what we're hearing in Congress. Envyings, murders, drunkenness, revelings, and such like, of the which I tell you before, as I have told you in time past, that they which do such things shall not inherit the kingdom of God. That's eternity that we're playing around with right here. So, we can keep arguing about whether or not they're animals, or we can condemn their behavior and move to follow the law, which would prevent them from continuing to do these heinous, evil things. It's up to you. Which sounds good to you? I'd rather follow the law. All right, when we get back, we're going to have Brian Fisher, co-founder of Human Coalition, and more. Stay right there.
Okay, so the big question for any decision you're going to make, is this actually going to work? Well, if you've heard about MediShare, which is a brilliant way of sharing healthcare costs, you may have wondered that. Does it work? Well, so did Dr. Stuart Hoover, who initially joined to save a lot of money. The typical family saves about $500 a month. Stuart saved even more.
When we first joined MediShare, we were immediately going from a little over $1,600 a month down to $460 basically a month.
So that's wonderful, but then his wife needed emergency surgery, and the bills added up to $160,000.
So we were seeing the bills coming in, and then the bills were being paid. Portions were being shared, and the end result of this is this bill was taken care of.
Yes, MediShare works, and it's so easy to get your questions answered too, so why not? You can call right now. 855-PSALM-23. That's 855-PSALM-23. 855-PSALM-23.
Hi, I'm Crawford Loritz with a Legacy Moment. Sometimes I've got too much going on. You've probably been there too. In order for me not to forget stuff, I need to be reminded. My wife, Karen, might call me to remind me of something. I've been known to leave notes in prominent places around the house or in my car. And where would I be without my administrative assistant or reminders on my phone? Some things are way too important to forget. In Numbers chapter 15, verses 37 through 41, God underscores that we need to remember and be reminded of these very crucial things. Listen to these words. The Lord also spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the sons of Israel, and tell them that they shall make for themselves tassels on the corners of their garments throughout their generations, that they shall put on the tassel of each corner a cord of blue. It shall be a tassel for you to look at and remember all the commandments of the Lord, so as to do them. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out from the land of Egypt to be your God. I am the Lord your God." God said, do something physical. The blue tassel was God's visible reminders. Basically, he says, remember the commandment of the Lord. Stay in the word of God. Remember to obey God. That tassel says, don't do what you want to do what God says. Also remember your sole allegiance is to God. God says, I am the Lord your God. Don't let your heart be divided. Let it be completely yielded to me. Well, here's what I want you to remember and do today. Keep a prayer journal. Go back to it often. It will remind you of what you need to continue to do.
Join Crawford Loritz tomorrow for another Legacy Moment.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right.
Welcome back to the show. Thank you guys for being here. God bless. And I hope that this middle of the week is finding you well and that the week is going well for you. We are galloping at our household towards Saturday, which is the graduation for our daughter, our oldest daughter graduating from high school. You guys, I have no idea what I'm going to be like on that day. Elated, of course, but this is a real rite of passage, not just for her, but for me as her mom and for our whole family. And so we're all feeling it, and it is wonderful, but it's also like, this is new territory, you guys. So I'm really excited about that. And we are going to be talking about the NFL's new rule. They are actually coming out and putting their foot down, or their cleats, or whatever the owners wear. They're putting their proverbial or metaphorical foot down and saying no more kneeling. So you can not stand for the anthem. You just don't have to come out while it's playing, but we're going to discuss that. We're going to get into some of the reactions that I've seen online, and we'll take your calls on it. Right now, it's my pleasure to welcome Brian Fisher, co-founder of Human Coalition, certified financial planner and author. Brian, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, Stacy, great to be back with you.
It's good to talk to you again. We have some really great news out of Washington, D.C., where the president has found a way to answer his promise on the campaign trail that Congress has not yet been able to, they've not been able to pony up and defund Planned Parenthood. So he's found another way to do it. And so you're talking about, our discussion today is going to be about how rhetoric is essential to promoting pro-life values. Tell us more about that.
Well, we launched a podcast several months ago called The Human Element Show, and one of the things that we're tackling there is the use of words and how the left has used words brilliantly quite frankly, to dupe Americans into believing that abortion is somehow about women's rights or something very Americana, when in fact it, of course, is about ripping a little baby limb from limb in the womb and killing the child. And so we are doing 2 full shows on this, and I've written on this for years because words are extraordinarily powerful, and we as pro-life people need to be very, very careful about the words that we use and how we use them so that we are conveying truth and candor in a winsome manner.
Okay, so what does that sound like? Because if you're passionate about the issue, we can come off very, very strong. I know I'm often very, very strong and pointed about it. There are a lot of questions for me as it pertains to the doctrine of, someone being a Christian, a pastor, a leader in the public eye, and claiming Christianity, claiming Christ, yet still advocating for abortion.
Yeah, which is one of the most bizarre things, I think, in our culture today. Well, you brought up the Title X announcement that the president made where he's using the Title X legislation, which is the family planning legislation, and is saying, look, we're going to divorce Planned Parenthood from that funding, which might result in them losing as much as $50 million in funding. They will allow the public to comment on that legislation for a couple of weeks when it gets released, and we certainly invite everybody listening to your show to comment. But when you go and do that, you will see a litany of poor rhetoric being used to justify the pro-abortion position, such as this judgment that Trump has made, this legislation will inhibit women from proper health care. Well, that's an interesting phrase because it obfuscates from what is actually going on with Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood, of course, the leading abortion provider in the country, kill over 300 children every year, has positioned themselves as a women's health care provider, and the vast majority of the public believes that that's what they do when their primary business is abortion. You'll see on that comment page reproductive rights, that abortion is about empowering women when, in fact, as you and I have discussed on other shows, that abortion is the ultimate exploitation of women. It's about choice, pro-choice. Well, the choice to do what? The choice to kill another human being. The use of language is something that we on the right need to be inspecting very carefully because, frankly, we parrot it. So your comment is very true. I've sat in churches and lectured around the country and have had Christian people come up and say to me things like, well, I'm pro-life except in cases of rape and incest. Well, why? Why is the value of the child dependent on the circumstances of conception? And so that language, the use of rhetoric, has seeped very much into the church, to where we have folks that don't lean on Scripture for our worldview, but instead lean on really, really, really bad language.
I think one of the things that ends up happening, at least I've gotten this reaction from people before, is they're insulted. It's like you put the slashes between things you're feeling when you're typing something out. You put slashes in between. You're feeling them all at the same time. They're insulted, hurt, and offended. That I would say that it's seriously like it's hard to imagine really reading God's word and communing with Him and spending a lot of time with God and really having a close relationship with our Father in heaven and still advocating for abortion. So I'm not talking about people who they're on the fence or they're personally affronted by it, but they're not sure what the law should be. I mean, people who actively claim Christianity, but then go out in public and on social media in public, they say, I'm donating. They wear the shirts. They're very, very vocal with it. They advocate for this so-called woman's right to choose. And then when I express that, invariably someone will say to me, how dare you? How dare you question whether or not I can be pro-choice and a Christian? Instead of addressing the issue, it's, I've somehow placed myself in a position where I'm the source of the angst, when the reality is people dare all the time. People accuse me of things all the time. And I sometimes think to myself, how dare you? But the issue really is the accusation. And so that goes to whether or not they can actually defend using Scripture their position, which means they're upset with me for a reason because I've poked a soft spot and they have no defense. So how do we get more people who are, honestly probably really wonderful people, God-fearing in every other area or in most other areas. But in this area, they're completely blinded to the fact that they're advocating for not just anti-Christian behavior, but demonic behavior. Abortion is demonic. It's there to destroy the life of the baby and to utterly, it's there to pervert the life of the woman in such a way that it's meant to separate her from God. That is demonic.
It is. Most folks that I have encountered who claim Christ as Savior and yet are still radically or vociferously pro-abortion have abortion in their past. So it's a very emotional issue because most folks who are pro-abortion and are very vocal about it are justifying a previous decision, and they haven't come to grips yet with what happened and why it happened. And so there's an opportunity for grace, there's an opportunity for healing in that situation, winsomely, lovingly bringing them back around to what the truth is regarding an abortion decision. At Human Coalition, we have several folks on staff who are post-abortive, and they would tell you it was the worst decision they've made in their entire lives, and they hope desperately that no one else will make that sort of decision. But the other thing that needs to be considered, if somebody is able to have a rational conversation, which, to your point, can be difficult with somebody who's radically pro-abortion, but if they're willing to sit down and confront facts, certainly the biblical evidence is irrefutable and vast. But as you well know, there's medical, scientific, philosophical, ethical arguments, and for those folks that I've encountered that claim Christ and yet hold to a pro-abortion position, the best resource that I've seen outside of Scripture itself is Scott Klusendorf's book, The Case for Life. It presents the philosophical underpinnings of the pro-life worldview in such an effective way that if they're able to rationally think and talk through it, you come away reading Scripture and that book with changed hearts and minds. The challenge is, of course, if somebody is post-abortive, they've had abortion in their past and they haven't dealt with it, it's all emotion, and they get very, very defensive and upset because to do otherwise is, in their minds, to convict themselves. And again, I think that's an opportunity for us to share the grace of Christ.
It is, and we can't be discouraged by that because the Bible talks about how we'll be reviled for His name's sake, and so it's a good place to be, but it's also, it can be where you're in need of encouragement. And I want people who are listening today who are advocating for pro-life to really, what you just said there, it's wonderful for us to keep in mind that we can still turn away anger and wrath with a soft answer, and we can offer the healing power of redemption. Jesus Christ is here. He came to save us and to forgive us and to heal us of, if you're post-abortive, there's just a wealth of resources out there for women who are post-abortive that they can come to a place of forgiveness and move on past what they did. And God, that's what God came for. That's what He's here for, is to redeem us and to set us free from these things.
Amen. The folks that we have on staff that are post-abortive would say, in fact, it was the worst decision they've ever made. However, the cross of Christ is bigger than the sin of abortion. And when I travel and meet folks, men and women, who have abortion in their past, you can see the pain on their face. Many of them will tell me there isn't a day that goes by that they don't think about their baby and their child or wonder how he or she would have turned out, what they would have looked like, what they would have done with their lives. The pain is very, very real, and it's very deep, and it can be extraordinarily destructive. It can lead to suicide and depression and substance abuse, self-abuse, all sorts of relationship problems if not addressed by the grace and forgiveness of Christ. That is the only hope. By my estimation, there's probably 30 million men and 30 million women in America who are post-abortive. I mean, the opportunity for the church to be an outreach to that population is really unprecedented because regardless of what they say, and there are a few people that say, oh, my abortion was no big deal, but in their heart of hearts, it's a big deal. And they really need love and compassion and forgiveness while we work to make abortion unthinkable and unavailable and save every single child that we can as fast as we can.
Amen to that. And so I encourage people to look out for it's Human Coalition, which is your organization, and a number of the pregnancy resource centers across the country, thousands of them, have similar programming. And so in your area, there's someone, if it's not Human Coalition, there's some organization that can help with programming, Bible studies, outreach, counseling, you name it. We're in the business of helping people to move past this decision into forgiveness. And then it's just so much freedom afterwards when people realize that they can be forgiven and they can go on and live for Christ anyway. So we really appreciate the work that you're doing. Brian Fisher, co-founder of Human Coalition. What's the website where people can find out more?
www.humancoalition.org, or they can check us out on Facebook at facebook.com/Human Coalition.
Perfect. All right. Thank you so much for your time today, Brian. Great to chat with you.
Thanks. You too.
All right. Talk again soon. So we know that God is here to redeem. He's here to save, set free. And that's the gold. That's what we want. And we want that for everyone, even for people who, as I love that his description is vociferously pro-abortion. People who are out there, really, it's almost like a second job for them that they have to advocate for it. There's no judgment. There's forgiveness for post-abortive women, and the fact that Planned Parenthood and the pro-abortion industry are in the business of duping women into, having abortions. They want to convince women to have abortions. The more women who are post-abortive, the better the odds are for them to be able to keep their government funding and continue to do what they do. And so it's better for them to make you one of their tribe than to allow you to escape scot-free without ever having had an abortion. So we want to have that same informational aspect of putting out there that women who are post-abortive deserve forgiveness, that there's forgiveness in Jesus Christ, and that there are ways and options available to them. So fantastic to speak with Brian. So now I want to pivot over to, I have all these really good scriptures, but I'm going to pivot over to this NFL thing. So it's trending on Twitter. It's been all day long. And I want to share with you, well, first of all, people are saying, imagine if 80% black NFL, everybody just stayed home for a couple of days. I bet you the owners would change their minds then. Yeah, they might for a little while they look for replacements, and then they would have a whole bunch of people who were unemployed. The NFL is a business, and I understand that people who are supportive of the players kneeling feel like it's a racial justice issue and that it needs to be addressed, but it's also on the job. So you can protest, but if you do it on the job, then you place yourself at your employer's mercy as to whether or not they're going to permit you to do that. So they issued a statement today from NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell, and it's very clear that they are no longer going to tolerate any kind of kneeling or protests on the job. So it's not a First Amendment issue. It is an issue of you're at work and they're paying you to be there and they're not paying you to protest. So they actually went with all of the NFL's members, the team owners. They got together and crafted this policy. They mentioned, kind of in a roundabout way, that they've created a platform that is unique in professional sports and even unique to American businesses. And they're working with their players to drive progress in the area of social justice. But then they turn to the subject of the protests, and they talk about how on-field protests created a false perception among many that thousands of NFL players were unpatriotic, which is not the case. They then go on, Roger Goodell goes on to say, this season, all league and team personnel will stand and show respect for the flag and the anthem. Personnel who choose not to stand for the anthem may stay in the locker room until after the anthem has been performed. So in other words, you don't have to respect it, but if you're out there, you have to stand up. If you don't want to stand up during the anthem, you can stay in the off-camera areas. He goes on to say, we believe today's decision will keep our focus on the game and the extraordinary athletes who play it and on our fans who enjoy it. And then there's a policy statement that comes afterwards with 6 items, and it includes a penalty that will be levied against any team that allows players to protest, and a 15-yard penalty on the team whose players protest. So they ain't playing around. They're ready to get back to the business of making money on football. Who can be surprised by that? When we get back, we're going to talk more about news of the day and take your calls at 866-963-2037. here on Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
There was a time where I was in the middle of doing something, and the Lord just really impressed upon my heart that I needed to buy my wife some flowers. I hadn't thought about it, hadn't done it in a while. And I walk into the door of our little small apartment, and I have the flowers in my hand, and my wife's eyes connect with mine. Her eyes just well up with tears. And I immediately start thinking, what's wrong? What happened? What's going on? And she said, Abe, I've been wanting some flowers, but I know what our financial situation is. And I didn't want to be an additional burden on you because I know things are tight now. And man, it was just a moment where my wife and I just fall more deeply in love with the Lord and more deeply in love with one another.
Tune in to the Hamilton Quarter, weekday afternoons at 5 Central on Urban Family Talk.
By relying on Him. Oh, God. Oh, Lord, I thank you. I thank you, Lord. I thank you, Lord.
Please call your senators today. It's time to put an end to the liberals' filibuster. Tell your senators to switch to a majority vote and defund Planned Parenthood now. Call the Capitol Switchboard at 202-224-3121 or go to afaaction.net. Again, call 202-224-3121 and tell your senators to switch to a majority vote and defund Planned Parenthood. Your call will make a difference.
Is God calling you to pursue theological graduate education? What's keeping you from taking the first step? Is it time? What if you could choose from flexible class options? Is it money? What if competitively priced seminary offered academic scholarships? Do you think you're alone? What if your classmates were just like you, balancing careers and families with seminary? Hello, I'm Dr. John Nyhoff, president of Wesley Biblical Seminary in Jackson, Mississippi. Take the first step. Visit wbs.edu.
Hi, I'm David Barton, founder of Wall Builders. And I'm Tim Barton, the president of Wall Builders. And we want to let you know about an opportunity this summer for 18 to 25-year-olds to come be a part of what we're calling the Leadership Training Program. Actually, the website is wallbuilders.com/leadership training if you want to see more information. But really what we're doing is trying to help young people combat a lot of the nonsense they're learning in academia, things that are anti-American or anti the Bible. And so we actually dig into the Bible, we dig into American history and the Constitution and education, and try to give a really good inoculation against some of the things that they're hearing in academics.
Yeah, Tim, you're exactly right. This is such an excellent opportunity to have the apologetics of the things that they'll face in academia and the culture. So if you're from 18 to 25 years old and you want training in this, and by the way, you get to actually hold the handwritten documents of George Washington and John Adams and other aspects of American history, this is a great opportunity this summer. 2 weeks. Go to wallbuilders.com/leadership training. Hope to see you this summer.
This is Stacy on the Right on Urban Family Talk.
The referendum on Friday isn't about abortion in limited cases. The government's proposal is extreme. It's all here in the bill in black and white. Unrestricted abortion would be available up to 12 weeks. That's abortion of fully formed babies for any reason. British-style abortion, up to viability, 6 months of pregnancy on unspecified mental health grounds. Don't believe the Yes campaign, fear and misinformation. Please vote no to this extreme proposal. Abortion is not healthcare.
So that's the campaign by the pro-life people in Ireland, and I think it's a fantastic offering that they're making. They're appealing to the reason of the citizens of Ireland and saying, look, this is not healthcare, and this is not something we want to involve our country in as national policy. So prayers are with the people of Ireland that they're able to withstand the onslaught of the pro-abortion industry that is trying to infiltrate their country. So now I want to turn over to some kind of entertainment news. It's interesting. It's an interesting day. So you've got on top of the NFL announcement, you have this breaking news, The Chew. Now, I don't know if you guys have ever watched this before. I think I've caught maybe one part of the program. The hosts were so weird, I couldn't really get into it. So it's The Chew. It's a program celebrating and exploring life through food, ABC's The Chew is an innovative daytime show co-hosted by fun, relatable experts in food, lifestyles, and blah, blah, blah. It's been canceled. So why did it get canceled? Well, apparently Mario Batali was one of the hosts there. And, you know, he had the whole sexual misconduct scandal that roiled the news. And so ABC has consequently announced that they are canceling The Chew on Wednesday, which is today. The 1 p.m. time slot will be replaced by a third hour of Good Morning America. Cancellation comes 5 months after co-host Mario Batali was fired following sexual misconduct allegations. So it's, remember Batali, you know Mario Batali. He was a really, really popular celebrity chef, restaurateur. He was the most famous of The Chew's original co-hosts when it launched in 2011. So it's been on for quite a while. He's 57 years old, and he was fired from the show in December. And the people who are left over are reality show contest winners. So they won cooking reality shows and became famous because of that. And now they're also out of work, which is it's just fascinating. So more women have come forward about Mario Batali's misconduct. And he owns a restaurant called The Spotted Pig in New York. It's actually owned by one of his friends, Ken Friedman. And so a segment on 60 Minutes was done about the women from there who claimed that when Mario Batali was at the place that they were, when the woman says she was raped. I mean, they're pretty horrible allegations against him. And so we watch as yet another, prominent man has been taken down by these allegations. It's interesting because all of these people are Hollywood acolytes. They're people that Hollywood has put forward to the American people as these paragons of virtue, people we should respect and admire, people who have the right to teach us about things, whether it's food or, building houses, whatever. They're making movies, they're directors, they're producers. They're people who decide what we can watch. There are people who decide how public opinion should be shaped. And here we see that he was, clearly there are some things he was involved in that were really, really disgusting. So they had their most watched week of the year after the allegations against Batali surfaced. The first week of 2018, they had a season high of 2.72 million viewers. They also beat out their competition, CBS's The Talk, in prime television watching demographics 18 to 49 and 25 to 54. So that's pretty fantastic. So they had their best ratings after his scandal broke. So, of course, those numbers don't last because he's no longer on the program. And so they don't have anybody on there that's a big enough name to support the show going forward. The ratings won't support it. And so they're trying to, stem the outflow. So also breaking news today, Jared Kushner, he got his top security clearance back. It is just pretty amazing that this was such a huge story in light of how many different people work for the Obama administration without clearances. But this was just so like the most important thing in the world that Jared Kushner did not have top secret. So he actually met with the Mueller team a second time. And there were just, in April, he answered questions for 7 hours. He was there with his attorney Abby Lowell. He had previously sat for an interview in November that was largely him testifying about things that he knew about Michael Flynn. And the developments are coming as Mueller's investigators appear to be trying to complete parts of their inquiry so that they can wrap it up. He was one of the first people to voluntarily cooperate with an investigation into the campaign. And he has continued complete cooperation. He has provided a large number of documents. He has sat for hours of interviews with congressional committees and provided numerous documents and sitting for 2 interviews with the Office of the Special Counsel. On each occasion that Jared Kushner has been interviewed, he's answered all questions asked and did everything he could to expedite the conclusion of all the investigations. Now, during the course of all of these interviews, he was stripped of his interim clearance. This was back in February, amid an overhaul of procedures. And so, I know a lot of people were calling for him to be let go because he didn't have clearance, but now his clearance has been restored. Apparently, the reason why he was stripped of the clearance initially was because his SF-86 form did not mention any foreign contacts, though he quickly supplemented it to indicate that he would provide that information. He updated the form in the spring, listing about 100 contacts, but did not mention the June 2016 Trump Tower meeting with Veselnitskaya and Don Trump Jr. So he updated the forms once more in June to include that meeting, and here we are. So, June of last year, now here we are. He's good to go. Fascinating, really interesting. I don't know if you guys have been following the big brouhaha with Meghan Markle, her getting married, her having the black pastor. That was her choice. Of course, her husband was involved in it as well. There's been so much discussion about how either her marrying Prince Harry is the best thing to ever happen to black women, or other people saying it's the worst thing to happen to black women, or people saying it just doesn't matter. I remember when Princess Diana, of course, I was younger back then, but Princess Diana was, everybody followed everything that she did. And it was kind of the saddest story ever because she married a man who he never really loved her. He was always in love with this mistress that he had that was married to someone else and was too old to be the princess and he couldn't marry her because she couldn't give him an heir because she'd been married to someone else and all the royal rules. And so, to see how far that whole saga has come to now Prince Harry marrying someone who she's a divorcee, an American, and the whole thing about her dress, there's so many negative comments about her dress was no good or her dress wasn't fit properly and all that. And in the midst of it, you're probably thinking, I'm going to say that's so irrelevant. It's so worthless. It's nothing that we should pay attention to. But I actually found it nice that for just a couple of days, at least in my Twitter feed, a lot of people took time off from politics to pay attention to that. And a lot of people chose to see the good parts of what was going on, meaning, the little kids who were in the wedding party and the faces of the royals as the black pastor was preaching and the train that she wore, the veil that she wore it was long. I mean, and it had one of the flowers from every one of the commonwealths that belonged to the British Empire was woven. The flower of each of those nations was woven into it. And so there were a lot of really interesting details. And I thought it was nice because it wasn't political. I mean, there were some people who tried to make it a little political and a little social justice warrior-y and even a little bit like statements about racism and statements about the Windsor family and how they all marry each other and they don't have any, genetic variety. So there was that stuff. But for the most part, I thought it was interesting to watch just because it was so far removed from everything that we Americans have because we don't have monarchs. We don't have kings and queens. As much as people want to say the Kennedys were our royal family, they weren't. They were never anything like that. And so this was cool because we got to look across the pond there and see there were a lot of Americans who showed up for the ceremony, got to see the clothes that the Americans wore, the clothes that the Brits wore, the pomp, the circumstance, the rules, so many rules that those royals have to live by. Like a couple of really inane ones. None of the women in the royal family can wear dark nail polish because the queen doesn't like dark nail polish. None of them are allowed to appear in public with their legs bare. So if they're wearing a dress, they have to have on nude stockings, no matter what the weather, because she doesn't believe in women coming out of doors with their legs exposed. Also, you can't wear anything that's more than an inch or two above your knee. If you are a member of the royal family, you as a woman, you can wear all the dresses you want, but they need to come to within an inch or two of your knee. So some of them are, you can imagine it's just decorum. It's just a way of making sure that people look nice, but they're all determined by the queen. So she literally has control over what they wear, how they enter into a room. They have to enter every room when they're together in order of precedence. They are not allowed to just walk in. You can't just, oh, there's an open door, let me walk into it. If you're with the other people in your family, you have to let them enter first according to order of precedence. And then when other people appear, you have to know where they rank in order of precedence above you or below you so they can either curtsy to you or you can curtsy to them. Now, if we were talking about this 200 years ago, it'd be like, yeah, so what? But this is 2018, and this family still abides by those rules and social conventions down to what nail polish can be worn. Also, none of the royals are allowed to have their own social media accounts. So Meghan Markle actually had to delete her Instagram account and take down, you can basically just make it private, her website that had been up. It's a lifestyle website, had been there for years. You can't find it. It's not there anymore because she took it down because she knew she was marrying into the family. The last thing I thought was pretty interesting was the tax implications for her. If she earns more than $300,000 in a year and she's married to Harry, which she is, then both his books and hers would have to be open for examination by the Internal Revenue Service, which is leading people to speculate that within the year she will apply for British citizenship, and once she attains it, she will renounce her citizenship as an American, which coincidentally, that number has shot up from about 2,300 per year on average. Last year, it was 5,800 people renounced their American citizenship. So I know you're probably thinking, wow, you're just a wealth of inane facts. I was reading all this stuff because it was nice to not be looking at politics. And also, it was another thing that I noticed that was not mentioned. British people don't really wear sleeveless outfits to formal events. None of the women that I saw in the pictures had on sleeveless dresses. Everyone had a sleeve. Short sleeves were there, but a lot of the women had on long sleeves, and they looked elegant. Those long sleeve dresses were actually very, very, very nice. So yeah, it was fascinating to me. I think one of the things I'm going to be looking for is this announcement, whether or not she's going to renounce her American citizenship. She could maintain dual citizenship, but because we are one of the few developed nations that actually requires citizens of our country to pay taxes whether we dwell in the country or not. Like if you're British and you don't live in Great Britain, you don't have to pay British tax. In America, you do. You have to, no matter where you live on this planet, you still owe American tax, U.S. taxes on any income that you make. So, and apparently that law was passed to punish soldiers who didn't want to fight in wars in America, and they would leave the country to go elsewhere, and to make sure that they couldn't go somewhere else and earn money without paying tax to the American government, they enacted that law. So pretty fascinating. So there's going to be lots more news and information on that. It's a nice way to kind of unplug if you, I'm not saying you, like everybody needs to get away from politics sometimes, and they're just really interesting, the Kardashians. I'm sorry, the royals. So that was the joke that I read, that the royals are just classier Kardashians. All of them are famous for who they are, not for anything that they've accomplished. I think that's a little bit raw. Like, obviously, the Windsor family, they've been around a lot longer than the Kardashians. Anyway, that's kind of like the entertainment beat on Stacy on the Right. So that's the show for today. We are actually not going to be with you tomorrow because it's time for me to prepare for our oldest child to graduate from high school. So God bless you. Be back with you next week.